Hello guys, and welcome back to HJW Gaming. In this video I'm going to be taking a look through some of the available units and talking through the units that I think you should use in your formation. I see a lot of people running a mix of different units, and I think they often are using the wrong units because they don't fully understand what makes a unit particularly strong in the Rise to War 2.0 meta. If you enjoy this, please smash the like button and consider subscribing for more of my guide content in the future. And with that, into the video. Now, first up, I have the first type of unit that you should, as often as possible, be trying to include within your formation, or at least within your barracks, and that is a Taunt unit. You can see here I have two examples of good Taunt units. Of course, if you have them available, the Swan Knights are an excellent tier 4 unit with high HP, defense, and also additional bonus defense from Protector, boosting it by 20 in the first 3 rounds. Now, this Taunt means that they can protect 2 allied formations for those first 3 rounds, which is excellent because it means all damage will be focused on them and their high defensive attributes rather than being focused on potentially other squishier units that they're trying to defend. Similarly, the Great Beast is also a brilliant choice. This is a tier 3 large unit, which is a big thing because that large unit debuffs enemy physical damage by 10%. They also have an enormous HP pool and decent defense, so they are one of the tankiest units in the game. They do buff fellow ranged units by 20%, but it's not a huge deal. The main thing you're looking at is their Bulwark skill, which ups their defense by 2, but the main thing is it actually taunts 3 enemy formations, so they prioritize attacks on this unit. So if you think about the Swan, it protects 2 other formations, so of course that means that one of your formations could be vulnerable to being targeted by the enemy, you're 1 out of your 4, but 3 will be protected, so you know there's a 3/4 chance that the damage will be dealt to your Swan, and therefore similar to this Great Beast, it's just worded in a slightly different way. This means that 3 of the 4 enemy formations will prioritize their attacks on this unit. Well, reduce the chance of your other units being hit by 75% is the best way to look at it. However, the main thing with the Great Beast, however, is that this Bulwark skill doesn't have a round limit. So that taunt will be in effect for the entirety of your fight. So therefore you can keep as much damage as possible away from your primary kind of damage dealers or squishier units. Now obviously if you combine either of these with a great tanking commander, the most popular tank at the minute is of course Sauron, due to his support skills, along with the fact that if you get him to high command he can be very tanky. But other popular choices here are Frodo and Sam particularly. I wouldn't recommend really Falcon as he does require dwarf units, but Frodo and Sam can also be a great combination with either of these. Isildur also combos pretty well with the Swan Knight. But I definitely think you should have a Taunt unit within your keep, as these can help protect the other units that you have in your army. The second unit I want to talk about is the Shire Protector, and this kind of follows on from the Swan Knight and the Great Beast. Now, Shire Protectors actually have reasonably mediocre stats apart from their attack and damage. They do deal actually a very large amount of damage, and this can be quite useful as they are one of the higher damage troops in the game. Of course, troop damage isn't particularly great, but the main reason that you want them is for the unexpected threat here. So there's a 50% chance to increase their damage dealt by 50%. A little bit more damage, doesn't matter too much. The main thing is, if the army includes other units, up to 1 other formation unit will protect your Shire Protector from being targeted by the enemies. So what does that mean? It means that if an opponent would target the Shire Protector to deal damage to, it'll instead switch to another of your units. So if you have other units all being really tanky, you can therefore get the damage dealt to your tanky units rather than this weaker defensively Shire Protector. So therefore, you want to run the Shire Protector on your commanders that have a low command stat. If they have a low command stat and therefore low damage mitigation, you can funnel the damage away from them and onto units which are more tanky and the commanders protect them better. So again, you take reduced amounts of damage. So Shire Protectors again should really be part of your army as often as possible, as they are truly brilliant for keeping your damage dealing commanders in particular, which would be the ones with low command, alive. As of course, you're not going to lose your Shires till they're like kind of the last unit alive, so therefore your damage dealing commander is likely to stay alive as long as possible too. The next unit I want to talk through is your standard tanking unit. Now I would put these in three kind of categories here. First up, I have small unit. I would recommend the Guardian. Now the Guardian is brilliant because, as you see here, whilst it has reasonably mediocre damage, it does have excellent HP and defense at 45 and 55 respectively. Of course, this is a 100 unit composition, so that would be 4,500 HP. So they are very, very tanky, along with having reduced burn damage, doesn't matter. The laceration skill can be useful for inflicting additional 20% physical damage. This can help to deal with opposition's White Council, as that additional instance of damage will remove enemy White Council. But the main thing is shielding, which can reduce their physical damage by 10%, and there's a 50% chance of that activating. So that, combined with their excellent HP and defense, makes them a brilliant tank. But not only that, they're also extremely cheap units, so you can produce a large number of these for a relatively low resource cost and very quick conscription, so you can get your commanders back out on the battlefield as soon as possible. This also means they're very cheap when they get sent to the apothecary as well, which is something a lot of people forget. They obviously have lower time in the apothecary and a lower grain cost when you need to heal them. So they can be brilliant for just continually spamming out Guardians and keeping your commanders out on the battlefield for as long as possible. Another tank unit kind of worth using could be the Cataphract. So this is obviously slightly tankier with 88 HP, though bear in mind of course that with the Guardian having, here you go, 45 and 55, that's a 100 composition. Cataphracts only have 50, so actually the total HP and defense pool is slightly lower. They do have, however, the full protection skill, which means the damage they receive from enemy melee units is reduced by 10%, as well as mounted reducing by a further 2%. The main reason you would use the Cataphract over the Guardian is to try and get a full medium unit army, so that you get the benefit of the countering system when coming up against an enemy small unit formation. If your entire army is made up of all medium units and your opponent's is made up of all small units, you will gain the countering bonus, as of course medium units get their damage dealt and their damage received buffed when they face off against small units. So the Cataphract could be a good choice. However, I'd still recommend the Guardian over the Cataphract. Reason being that the Cataphracts have the kind of opposite benefit to what I've just described with the Guardian, in that Cataphracts actually are extremely expensive, particularly in iron ore costs. They do take an extremely long time to conscript, so you will find that actually your commanders are getting pulled off the battlefield pretty regularly, unlike when you use Guardians and you can just keep spamming them out. The third tank unit that can be extremely effective is the War Chariot. Now you'll see they have high defense at base 64, but they are a 4 unit composition. Their HP on the other hand is massive at 1300, so of course 4 of these means that you'd get a massive 5200 base HP that the opposition has to take out. On top of that, they also are a large unit, so they take 10% less physical damage, and that's not just from opponents' melee units, like the Cataphract with its skill. This is physical damage in total, so including commander physical damage like that dealt by Baorn and Dane. This can be reduced by 10%, so this can be massive in reducing the amount of damage you received and units you lose, of course, as well. Their scythe skill is also brilliant, as it can inflict a bleed to the enemy and additional physical damage, so this is great for clearing out enemy White Council. And Reap is also pretty useful as well, just for increasing your troop damage a little bit as well, but the main thing is that large unit, scythes and their HP. However, of course, this goes even further beyond that of the Cataphract as far as cost goes. They're a tier 4 unit and their resource conscription difficulty is hard, so they cost a huge amount of resources and take a large amount of time. I'd only recommend using the War Chariot or the Cataphract over the Guardian in an instance where you kind of have a breather, you know, an amount of time where you're not at war with enemy factions, so you have time to conscript and fill your barracks with these units. Otherwise, I would always recommend just using the Guardian and pumping them out kind of as much as possible. The last type of unit I recommend that you should always have available in your barracks are flying units. So that's either the Eagle or the Fell Beast currently within the game. So the reason you want to have these is because of, in fact, the flying army skills that both of them have. And this means that outside of normal combat, they can traverse terrain and bypass obstacles, meaning that you can fly over rivers, crossings, passes, and just continue moving without having to worry about capturing these. So that means you can, for example, attack opposition forts or opposition fortresses, or in fact their keeps as well, or just anything that you want to hit on the other side when an opponent is defensive. Or you can move around the map at incredibly fast speeds in order to get to an area that you've been looking to get to a lot quicker. On top of this, they're actually pretty strong units as well. You see their HP here as far as tanking goes is 1100, and they are in groups of 4, so that's 4400 HP total, so they're pretty tanky on top of that, as well as being flying units, so they take 20% less melee damage, though you do have to watch out for enemy ranged troops, as they can bring your eagles down a little bit quicker. Similarly, the Fell Beast is very strong as well, not quite as tanky of course with that lower HP, but what you do get from having the Fell Beast instead is its Vile Stench ability, which can inflict poison on the target, dealing poison damage, and that can help remove enemy White Council that little bit quicker, so they can be a little bit more of an offensive option versus the Eagle. But the main thing with both of these is just the fact that they're those flying armies, so you can move around the map as quickly as possible, as well as traversing against difficult terrain, basically. The other reason to use Eagles and Fell Beasts, as I'm sure a lot of you are screaming at your monitor right now, is of course the fact they both have extremely high speed stats as well, or initiative stats, so that these can be used excellently on commanders that have pre-battle phase skills. For example, Nazgul on Scalhelm, White Council on Gandalf the White or Gandalf the Grey, the Deceiver on Sauron, or also both of Frodo and Sam's top Respect 0 and Respect 5 skills, such as Ring Bearers. The reason you want high initiative for these is if the opponent's Sauron or other madness dealing commander in the pre-battle phase is quicker than your commander with pre-battle skills, they can actually inflict madness on you and make you inflict these pre-battle phase skills onto the opposite unit. So for example, if they're quicker than your Gandalf the White, your Gandalf the White can then give the White Council damage reduction actually to your opponent's troops, meaning that they take significantly less damage. So you want more initiative to make sure that your pre-battle phase skills activate before your opponents. So therefore, flying units are excellent for this, as they are the fastest units in the game. Now, of course, I appreciate there are exceptions to these rules that I've stated. For example, you might look to use the Sentinel or another elf unit if you use Gil-galad in your army. Of course, if you use Gil-galad and you want to use his evasion, elf units are essential. If that's the case, you're going to want to look to use the Sentinel or perhaps also the Bow Knight as well, as both of these are elf units. Of course, this is an exception specifically required by a commander's skill, though I would specify that that's one of the reasons why Gil-galad is perhaps not one of the upper tiers of the meta in my opinion, or at least one of the top commanders, as these elven unit requirements, they are extremely squishy. The reason I would, even on almost every commander, recommend using a Guardian over a Sentinel, even if you have, say, Great Beasts in your army, is that there's no situation almost where the extra damage you get from the Sentinel or a ranged or damage dealing unit will outweigh the amount of damage extra received or units that you lose as a result of that lower HP and defense. You're better off taking less damage through using a Guardian and dealing less troop damage than you are from dealing a little bit more troop damage but losing a hell load more of your ranged damage units. So I'd almost always recommend using something like a Guardian where possible, outside of where a commander skill requires it. For example, like I said, Gil-galad. Elrond can be another example requiring a man or elf unit, but in that case I'd probably just look to use the Cataphract and stick with the tanky units. And of course the other exception to this is siege units. If you want to specialise in dealing a lot of siege, you will be looking to use something like the Alchemist with its S tier siege, so you'll want to use this to be able to deal as much siege as possible. So of course that is another notable exception. The Spear Thrower is also another possible exception, as it can inflict bleed, which can be useful against White Council, but perhaps the main exception, which I don't have here, is the Berserker, as that's an excellent and the quickest small unit bar for these flying units, and also have very, very low resource cost. So if you're looking for a quick unit, the Berserker can be the way to go in the thick of war. Personally, in my seasons, I would always look to use basically what I have here in my keep. You want your tank unit, which in my case I'm using the Guardian. You want your Taunt unit, so I'm using the Swan Knight. And you also want your flying unit, so I'm using the Eagles. And then I've also got the reverse taunt as well with the Shire Protectors. So hopefully you guys have found this helpful, and hopefully I've explained the logic through pretty well. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments. And let me know if you disagree with me, of course, because there's a ton of units in this game which I think almost don't have any use at all just because of their base defense stats. If you disagree with me, feel free to let me know down in the comments, and make sure to explain why you think they're worth using so we can have a discussion. But anyway, with that, that's everything I wanted to run through today. If you've enjoyed, please smash the like button, and please also consider hitting subscribe to see more of my guides and season updates in the future. And with that, I've been HJW Gaming, and I hope to see you on the next one.